Farming and Ranching with Assistance from Space. This week's episode discusses NASA Harvest, which has been around since 2017. Welcome to Hashknife Hangouts. I'm Calen. The other guy is Brandon, my co-host and father. If you're new to the channel, like, comment, and subscribe. While you're at it, check out the social media on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and now Rumble if you prefer that platform over YouTube. We've been uploading everything from YouTube over to Rumble. For those returning, thanks always for supporting. And now, on to today's topic. I am now going to grab my handy-dandy tablet and start reading from here instead of the screen so you don't see my white face. Here we go. So, technology and the use of it for agriculture has resulted in continuous increases of efficiency and maximizing work for agriculture. Because of that, you may have seen a couple of previous videos in the shoot, a cow satellite, and then, of course, the rambling. We'll put the links above. The rambling was on technology and agriculture. There are a few things I would like to discuss. First, we'll talk NASA. I think it's actually a really cool topic, and I think we'll enjoy most of our time doing that. The second is the automation of butchering and packaging. Third is robotics, much like our rambling or our in the shoot episodes. We'll talk about that and GPS enabled vehicles. We once said artificial intelligence, and that's not really accurate. Like Dad pointed out, it's more just robotics and GPS. And then fourth and finally, it'll be the future of tech in agriculture, especially looking at maybe capabilities. This was something I saw on Twitter today. I thought it was really cool. Capabilities to minimize food waste. And then I was thinking about something else of how to minimize injury in agriculture as well. So with that, I'll jump into the first topic and we'll just go down it after I give my little spiel. But NASA, the use of NASA was brought to us by a dear friend a few months ago. And I finally spent some time looking up the information and checking out the program so we can actually have this discussion. So here it is. Never before have I ever thought about using space tech and how it would assist in agriculture. But when you look at it, everything makes sense provided our increasing abilities each and every year. We have discussed this before on a shoot episode. Checked out the link above, cow satellite. But today we'll discuss exactly what NASA Harvest and dive into some of those deeper uses of it. NASA Harvest was established in 2017, as I said before in the intro, and its mission statement is that NASA's Harvest, here it is, NASA's Harvest mission is to enable an advanced adoption of satellite Earth observations. Wow, words are hard today. Satellite Earth observations by public and private organizations to benefit food security, agriculture, and human and environmental resiliency in the U.S. and worldwide. So they're not just looking at the United States. They do want to incorporate the United States because we're one of the biggest producers in the world. But I think they're probably using that as a platform to kind of leapfrog from. But then finally, their approach, the NASA Harvest approach is this, in quotes. We're a consortium of multidisciplinary and multisectoral actors from around the world, led and implemented by the Harvest Hub at the University of Maryland. Our consortium brings together world-renowned experts working on environmental, economic, and social aspects of agriculture in universities, research centers, industry, space agencies, humanitarian organizations, ministries of agriculture, and more. And so looking through all their stuff, I'll put a link below so you can kind of look through a bunch of their things if you're actually interested in the subject. But their three prioritized impact areas are through improved methods and products for these three things. One, agricultural land use, agricultural sustainability, and then agricultural productivity. So with that, I'll kind of hand it over to Dad, kind of get his initial comments on that.
Well, as always, I'm the one who's kind of the skeptic and the, distrustful of good things can be developed. Really good tools can be used. How are they going to be used? At what purpose is this? Whenever you have a global consortium of something, and you start talking about, social meaning for it, these are buzzwords. I've got no problem with sustainability and productivity, but that's from my perspective. My perspective may be, hey, let's increase the sustainability. Let's make this better. Doesn't mean you're going to produce more out of it. Well, you can produce something out of it in a better way so that it is more sustainable, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Someone else's idea would be, hey, we want to sustain this for, millennia, And the best way to do that is to not produce. Well, that's a completely different aspect and look at that. And when you say the social part of that, what are we going to do? Are we going to tell people, hey, we shouldn't use this because it's bad for you, so we should only never eat meat, for instance? And there's plenty of people that have that drive,
Right.
and at a high level, and some governmental type decision making that impacts everybody, whether it's good for them or not. But then it's again a social agenda. So I hear these things and I look at tools that could be just phenomenal. It's like, oh yeah, this would be really good. It's only as good as how well it's used and for what purpose it's used. So I'm always skeptical and
No,
always
I
worried that that's an issue.
I absolutely agree, and that's something I was looking at again. The three priorities of NASA Harvest. I think NASA Harvest is agricultural land use, agricultural sustainability, which you mostly just focused on, and then agricultural productivity. But to me, I think this goes really well in hand with the link that I talked about, the cow satellite that we had that discussion about, because it talks about how you can use satellites from above to really look at, okay, how well is this ground being used? How, and from a productive way, a more optimistic way, it's, am I maximizing my land in terms of not just this year, but also in the future, so that we're not ruining it because we might get 100 whatever widgets off of it, but then next year, because we've used it so much that now we're only going to get 50 after this, versus we're going to try and get 80 this year so we can get 80 every year. That's a so much better sustainable way. But no, I absolutely agree that that does concern me too, because whoever does determine what the sustainability is, what's the definition of sustainability, they could determine at any point, oh, you're under sustainable, and so therefore I will now tell you how to manage that ground. And you've had this discussion before. Actually, I saw on a recent episode with Dunroven, at some point you get worried about people telling you, you're going to live on the land and work it, but the government will essentially pocket the money, or produce the money for you to do it. And then you're just a slave to the land.
Correct.
Yeah.
We're headed that way anyway. I mean, our is a whole different deal, but our fees, EPA regulations, taxes, they're doing that to you anyway. They're boxing you in to a spot that's you're limited so much that you can't make decisions. You can only do what they tell you to do. That's where you're headed down that road. We're there. We have been there.
Yeah. Talking about that though, I think sustainability, looking at their 2 points, sustainability and productivity, I feel those personally, I think those things are very very much the same thing. Maybe not to some others. I don't know. I think being sustainable produces more productivity, in my opinion.
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, I do. I mean, sustainability is just that. How long can you sustain this? Can you sustain this indefinitely? That's
Right.
sustainability. Can we continue to do the same thing over and over and over and get the maximum results without shortening or reducing the amount of production out of it? That, to me, that's your maximum sustainability. If you can do something and not reduce what you're doing by force because you have to, then you are sustaining what you're doing and then getting the maximum production out of it. And that's really where you're at. It's that balance for a producer, I think, whether you're making grains or you're making cows or whatever you're making on that thing, is to be able to get the most out of it without having to reduce the production on it, and continue to do that for as long as you can. To me, that's the optimum, but I may be wrong.
Well, and I think something else too with this is we've had this discussion before with regenerative agriculture. I see sustainability. You can pull the productivity part off of it for a second, but the sustainability part very much goes with regenerative agriculture, because we've talked about not trying to run the ground into just pure dirt, right? And then you can't use it. Regenerative is managing it, making sure that, like Braden being the rangeland specialist, he knows, okay, we're starting to get a lot of weeds here. We need to back off a little bit. And then we also need to come at it with some weed killer and some maybe a little extra seed or something like that. That's regenerative agriculture and sustainability, just like you're talking about, which then feeds into that productivity. I don't see where, again, these things are all tied together. That's what's crazy. But I find it very hard trying to pull those apart. I don't know. Maybe do you have a perspective on how you can kind of pull sustainability and productivity apart?
Yeah, there's absolutely. I think there's a big difference in how you would go about managing that. To me, sustainability and productivity is what you can get out of that thing naturally. Yeah, you could throw seed at something, and I think he was talking about these are some of the extremes you could do, because it's not what we
Yeah.
do. We haven't
Yeah.
seed anything, but you could run something down to where you deplete it, and you go, okay, well, we know, anybody knows this, when you do this to a piece of ground, if you overgraze it, if you stress it, you're going to get weeds, the type of undesirable things that you don't want to have, and they really don't produce or help produce either grains or your livestock. So you could hit it with chemical, you could reseed, and you could boost it along that way by those means. But those are I think, ways that are not necessarily going to work long term. If you have to
No.
keep doing that, you certainly have more expense into it.
Right.
And then, are you really spinning your wheels? Are you getting the maximum out of it that you can?
Well,
Not that you can't manage it that way, but you could.
maybe
I think it's better not to.
maybe that's the way to look at it. Is, now that I'm thinking about it, is you've got land use, sustainability, productivity. Maybe it's that circle. Maybe that's what really we should look at it as, because what you're talking about is, yeah, you can do that to make it more productive and you can maximize the use of that land, but is it sustainable? It's, or maybe less of a circle, but more of a triangle. If one of those corners falls, then it all tumbles. Because what you're saying is that may be sustainable for the ground in a sense, because you can do a regenerative farming or ranching through a non-natural means, but that's not necessarily sustainable for the business, because you're going to continue to throw out expenses that make it an unsustainable feat or task or a job.
Possibly, yeah. In like the chemical use, I mean, we've used chemicals in our industries for decades, and we've gotten better at them. Some of them were, had high residual type action in them, and it's like, ooh, that's not necessarily, because what if you need to grow something else and it's not compatible to it? I mean, I know, Braden knows more about that than I do, really. I mean, I just have a thimble full of knowledge on that, but there are some things that compete with crops that are not desirable, and you selectively spray for those. If you're, say a wheat farmer, oats, barley, corn, whatever. And so when you do that, it isn't necessarily that you are wiping something out so that something will grow. You're just taking away a competitor. So another way to look at that, just a little different way to look at that you're selectively doing it. So, and you're taking a legume like alfalfa and you're nitrogen fixing into the ground. At some point you have to roll another crop in. Now that's sustainable, because you're rotating a crop based on what that plant puts into the ground or takes out. That's a really cool way to do it. And you look back in history, George Washington, a dude was amazing. His understanding of crop rotations and being able to get the most production out of something on the same piece of ground.
Right.
Obviously, it's different than what we have here as far as your soil types and your rainfall and all of that. But still, it's the same concept, that crop rotations are extremely important and beneficial for other crops.
Right.
So that's sustainability right there.
Well,
and the production follows.
And as a side note, historically speaking, I think that's an interesting one too, because tobacco was probably I think it was one of his big products, and tobacco is so hard on the ground. So it forces him to have to figure out how to do that to, again, be sustainable. Because I think after like 4 or 5 harvests, you have to rest the ground, because tobacco just destroys it, and you have to get the nutrients back into it. Yep. But moving on to another question that I have about this is kind of coming back to the original question, which was, the use of satellites and incorporating it into agriculture. How available do you think this is going to be to the regular Joe? So it's obviously satellite technology. all of us have smartphones for the most part. There's probably a few out there that still have flip phones, but they still have access to computers of some sort or another. How accessible and usable do you think this is going to be to the regular uh, farmer Joe, rancher Joe, who has only, 500 acres, or even, maybe towards the East Coast where it's a lot more productivity with 100 acres or so much or something like that? What do you think that accessibility and actual use and application is going to be for the regular guy?
Well, again, there goes my pessimistic view of that. It's only going to be as usable as is allowed to be used. If the
Okay.
government controls that and says, "Oh, you know what?
In terms of like
This
censorship and access to certain,
access for one,
yeah,
yeah, absolutely." And what do we want you to see?
yeah,
I mean, satellite imagery. When you look at your weather, for instance, you got Doppler radar, you got infrared, you've got normal just viewing, you've got all these different layers of how they can view um, your clouds and where it's at, what's going on in the atmosphere. The same thing can be happening from that level down to the ground. What do we want you to see? What is it we're looking for? And if you've got bureaucrats that are controlling that and say, we only want you to see this because we want to kind of nudge you in this direction, it's only as good as what you're going to get. And I can see where they say, oh yeah, this is a great tool, we're going to give you free access to this, but this is how they're going to control it. I mean, I know this sounds so conspiracy theory type, but I just do not trust bureaucracies.
well, and even without that, let's assume that everybody involved has the best of intentions. The other thing I'm concerned about is updates, like regular
Yeah.
updates, because if you look at Google Maps, I look at the ranch on occasion, just out of curiosity. I'll zoom over it, and that picture of the ranch has been on there, the exact same satellite image on Google Maps for almost 10 years. And so you can't hit every place in the world. I understand that. I really do. But at the same time, what's if that's Google Maps, I get it. It's not military where they've got more capabilities and more access to other stuff. It's not national security. Again, more access to more satellites and everything like that. But at what point, at what point does it kind of get that access to be able to get a real-time update? That's another thing too.
Well, and yeah, you're only as usable and as good as your current information.
Right.
What is current?
Yeah. If
Last
current
year
was
is
10
last
years
year's too
ago.
late.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was remember that show Duck Dynasty? Those guys had an argument about that. And so they threw a bunch of decoys up on top of their
Yep,
roof.
that's right. That's
Remember?
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
same thing, because they were arguing about, oh yeah, that doesn't update very often. So
Yeah.
it's the same thing. It's only as good as your most current and usable information. And then you have to look at, okay, they're going to prioritize on an entire globe. What is, say, the Northwest? This is cattle country, Montana, Wyoming, some of the Idaho, the Dakotas, Nebraska.
Dakotas. Yep.
Um, okay, this is cattle country. Really, how important is that to the bureaucracy? It's not. We are not sparsely populated, or we are sparsely populated. We don't have a lot of people in this area, so they think more in terms of people instead
Yeah.
of assets. And I call assets, again, grass, water, that kind of thing. But maybe as people get more and more hungry, or the commodity is not there where they think it is, then they'll start using it. Now, are we using our ground right now as efficiently as we possibly can? I probably, in some cases, yes, because we've been doing this for so long. A guy knows where his cattle graze. They know where their favorite parts of that pasture is, where their better grasses are.
Tricks to
Um,
pull them where they need to
yeah,
maximize the use of it. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. So you know where not to put your salt. You don't want to put your salt
No.
and mineral in a spot where they want to go anyway. You need to pull them off to a spot where they travel for it, they graze it out, and utilize that ground to evenly disperse them. If you do that all through a bureaucracy, or somebody in Maryland who is looking at their computer, they may not even know that you do that. So I think that we use our ground pretty efficiently now. Could it be better? Absolutely. I mean, in more data, to me, is better. The
Yeah.
more you know, the more tools you have, why not use them? So um, it doesn't mean that we're in the Stone Age on this, and we're gonna start all of a sudden into the space age That's not true at all. I think we're using this ground and utilizing it. In some cases, some people are really good at it. Some people are moderate at it. Some people are data or profit driven to get them through a short period. They hope a short period of downtime. If you have the ability to have thousands and thousands of acres, say you got a couple thousand acre place, it's pretty nice, especially if it's, paid for or most of it. And it's good usable ground and you can run some cattle on it and then have the numbers, then you're probably doing pretty well there too. But still, you got to manage that ground. You got to manage the numbers on it. It's just bigger numbers.
Now, continuing with the use of the program, if it's accessible, everything's updated, we're assuming everything's hunky dory. And I know if Greg has gotten to this point and he's watching us, he's going, "You guys are killing me. You're just completely raining on my parade right now." But now let's assume, like I said, everything's perfect. It actually really works. It's user friendly. It updates on a regular basis. It provides real-time feedback, stuff that's really usable and applicable to what everybody's doing. The last question I have for is, how much do you think farmers and ranchers are actually going to use it then? Because here's the real thing. The concern that I have is that as a community, as a whole, the farming and ranching community for the most part is middle-aged to towards the end of their life. That same group is not so handy with technology and oftentimes struggles with it on a regular basis. How realistic is it that these people, these men and women, are actually going to be able to use the program and incorporate it into their daily operations?
Well, let's take a look at it this way. I'm pushing 60 and you're coming up on 30.
Yep.
How many times have I made some kind of a post on Twitter or Instagram or YouTube? How often have I done that?
You left out Facebook because you ghost through your wife's profile.
Well, I do look at her stuff, yeah, because she's always, "Oh, this is cute. Look at these pugs," and shows it.
Yeah. No, but no, you have those platforms. You have not done any of it.
No.
I've done all of it.
Right.
But you do, like I said, you do make some posts on her Facebook.
But even because it's technology for part of it, and I think there's a lot of stuff that's like, why? Entertaining, yeah, but usable tool. If it was a super usable tool, I might be on there a lot more. We do this because it's usable for us as an educational platform. We want people to understand what we're doing, and it's not like we're doing this out of the kindness of our heart. Well, like we kind of are, because we don't get paid for that. At this point, maybe we will, but my point to this is us older people in this industry probably won't use it as much as the ones who are standing beside us in this industry.
Yeah.
And they are also influenced a little bit. And part of it is the technology itself. Being able to use it, it's just being a matter of being able to be shown how to. No big deal. It's just, can you do it? And that's part of it, is the usability. Something has to be very usable or accessible without a lot of struggle for most people, I think. And that's just a sad fact of it. And I think overall, some of these things have gotten better that way. But if it's a good tool, people, even our older people, will do it. They might struggle to be getting on it or to be able to maneuver the whole type of programs that are there. But once they're shown and it's usable, man, they're going to use it. There's no doubt in my mind. It's just, we're not as adept at jumping onto things and figuring it out until we have to or until we need to. But we got younger people behind us that are doing that and showing us and say, "Hey, look at this," and go, "Oh, okay, I need to get into that. Show me how to do that." So that's just my perspective. And there are other people that are my age that they're computer geeks, and they're just all about jumping on something like this and getting the most out of it and seeing it's like, "Oh, I wish this thing did this." And hey, that's a good idea. So that's personality driven too.
All right. That's kind of all I've got for the NASA harvest. I think it's a good discussion. I think there's a lot of things that could potentially come from it. I hope it does, but we'll see. Again, a lot of it I think is going to be also technology driven, just like you pointed out. But moving on to my second topic that I have is automation for butchering and packaging. So I got two notes for it. This is kind of where my brain went. I saw there's an upcoming Iowa plant from a recent government fund allocation that they're trying to build. It's to help combat the packing industry. It's a way of kind of inserting a way of doing it. We'll see how that works. That's you're taking you're taking a penny and trying to push it up against $1,000 bills. But the point that came from that was also there was I think a thread or a article or something that I saw that also said the Omicron variant of COVID has because of it, the reaction and the things that you're doing, the policies for quarantine for employees or anybody who's sick, it has slowed butchering. And that's because, again, workers are out on quarantine or something like that. And that made me think of how businesses will make things more efficient. We've looked at over the last 2 years how less and less cashiers are at the grocery stores checking people out, and it's more self-checkout stuff because people are out. Maximize the use of machines, minimize the use of the workforce, because then things can continue to run without humans when they're not there. So it made me think with this Iowa plant coming up and this recent recent variant, what's the reaction going to be for butchering and slaughtering? Are we going to start making things more and more automated? Like, what do you think? And do you think that's actually a possibility?
Well, how long? Take a look at it right now. When we send our butcher animals for, that we're selling to somebody or using ourselves, and they go to one of the people in a list of butcher shops, and they kill on the spot and harvest and do all of that. How long does it take them to skin an animal? They're doing it by hand.
I don't know. Yeah, I was gonna say
it takes
probably,
a while.
I mean, they're
skilled.
well practiced at it, but I'd imagine it probably takes 10 to 15 minutes for them to get that thing off there.
Or longer.
You think it's longer than that?
Could be if you're by yourself.
It is a
sure. You got to move. Yeah. It's a large animal. Have you ever watched any? Go to YouTube, put a link in there if you can somewhere. Where's that go? Up here or up here?
I can only link our stuff. I'm not that skilled.
Okay. See, there you go. There's this young versus old technology use.
Yeah.
But if you watch, they do their initial cuts after they've, you're going to pull a hide off, so the entrails are gone, and they hook those up, and that pulls that hide off with a hydraulics and machine. I mean, it strips it within seconds. It's amazing to watch that. So that's already happening, but it's happening with people, manipulating the tool. It's a tool. Yeah. So the efficiency there has already increased incredibly, but these are high production places. The places we go to are local.
They're like a mom and pop shop.
Mom and pop, absolutely. Yeah. And they're using the best technology they have, and they're using some things, for instance, low tech, hanging an animal up with a tractor or laying them out on a rack and doing one side, picking them up, pulling it off. I mean, it's very low tech, but it's low production as well. So when you're running those animals through, and they're using large saws, blades, and they are, I mean, just literally, when you think process, you don't think of the speed and the efficiency of what they're doing it right now. Yeah. It's amazing. I challenge somebody, just YouTube that, and you'll see that. I can't use YouTube. I've done it. So
well, and
I'm just joking. Yeah, it's not bad.
Here's really where I'm coming with this. So I saw a video from, I think it was Iowa farmer. I thought I referenced him last week. I don't remember. But his whole process, he's a dairy farmer in Iowa, and his whole process is literally done by a robot. He's just there to make sure the robot works. The hydraulics are running. The feed is getting fed into the pellets. He's taking care of the animal's living area while that thing milks the cows all day long, 24/7. So that's kind of where I was thinking is, how much of the butchering and packaging plants are they going to transition over to 99% robotics versus where we have a lot of humans using robotics, like you just said, with like the hide. It's incorporating and making their stuff more efficient. But because of the reaction to like COVID with quarantines and stuff like that, are we going to look more towards butchering and packaging becoming almost solely robotic, so we don't have to deal with workers being there and a slowdown occurring, just like we saw in the initial days of COVID, where people went home and suddenly we're not pushing meat through. We're just slowed down to the point where there's no production, and then hogs are getting killed because you can't take them to slaughter and stuff like that.
Well, some of that was a reaction because we didn't know.
Right.
We're continuing to know, and they're still paying people to stay home.
Yeah.
That's not about the food chain. That's not about those are policies, not actual reality of how dangerous is this. Whole
But the
different
reaction,
topics.
but the reaction to that,
Reaction's the same.
that's my
Yep.
point though, is the reaction to that may drive more
Yep.
robotic use.
Here's one thing I know about, and I've never been around robots really.
Yeah.
There's some things that we don't think of as being robotic, but probably are compared to, years ago. However, when I think about what will happen with anything that's mechanical, it will break down.
Right.
And if you've got something going on there in a production line or 3 or 4 lines, and one of them breaks down, let's say you got a production line of 4 different areas where these animals get processed, and all of a sudden one line breaks down for whatever reason, or something it misses, and now you have to stop that line. You've just reduced that by 25%.
Yeah.
Until it gets back up and going. And it's not going to do it. The robots are not going to think about what to do. They are just programmed to do a thing, and it does it. So when you see that happen, it's not good. Doesn't mean it's going to be flawless. You still have to have people that are there to pick that up, repair it, keep it moving. And you may be going, okay, everybody, we're going to drag this out of the way. We're going to get this back up. But it slows everything else down, or they increase the production on the other lines, which if they're using robots, they're doing that thing just as fast as they possibly can. And so, increasing that speed may not be realistic. Whenever you increase the speed of something, the chance that you don't do it flawlessly increases.
Right.
And so you can also have a miss on another line, or you have a breakdown, or something occurs like that. It's amazing the robotics of things that have taken place. I was just looking at a thing on YouTube with Seiko guns. Look at a Seiko rifle, how that barrel is made, all done by computer programmed robots. And the machining, I mean, it is unbelievable what's done. It's finally tested by people, and it's done some quality assurance with them, but the whole thing is done. The action, some of these actions are, the bolt is one piece, all machined, one piece bolt. It's like, what the heck? So you can do it, but it still takes a risk that you're going to have major breakdowns. And what if you can't fix that? It's going to still take people to do it. So whether there's an advantage there or not, I don't know. I can only imagine being a worker in one of those places. It's because it's an assembly line type issue. I mean, that's smart. Ford had it right. But don't think that those people aren't working as hard as they can and as fast as they can in those production lines. They are. And I would not want one of their jobs. That would just not be fun, because at that point they're a tool, right? They are a robot that they want the maximum production out of. They're just breathing, thinking, human flesh type robot. So they're doing it as quickly and as efficiently as possible, I'm sure, but they're still thinking, and they can probably outthink that robot. That robot can only do what it's been programmed to do.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's a good point. Realistically, then, when you're looking at that process, how much do you think robotics will get involved? Will it become increasing as to more and more assistance to humans, with a phase out of less humans there to actually do things? Or do you think it's going to mostly maintain the same, where it's 90% humans with maybe a little bit of automation here and there? What do you think it's that the future of technology in terms of packaging and slaughtering and butchering is?
I honestly don't know. I think it would surprise you how much they can do. I think that's I'm constantly surprised when I see things like that. It's like, how in the world do they do that? And do that without having somebody there to and somebody's monitoring it, but to actually do what it needs to do.
Right.
The robotics is getting better, sensors and almost like tactile sensory in some of these things. It knows when it grabs, widget A.
Yeah.
It knows that. It knows when it's missed it. It knows when it's not in exactly the right place. So, that stuff's getting better and better all the time. And I don't know enough about the ins and outs of a processing plant to know where they could make more advancements that way, or this will never work. I just don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me that you're going to have more robotics doing more of the work with less people. I mean, that's the whole name of the game, because once they put the robotics in, it's just the cost of maintaining it. They don't take health insurance. They don't take cost of living increases.
Yeah.
I mean, we're pretty high maintenance animal. So if you can, we're not that cheap, or we're not that expensive to make, but we're not that cheap to maintain.
Yeah. The last question I have with this, and it could go down a really bad way. I can see more and more robotics being used throughout the assembly line, for sure. Let's assume, robotics become like a main thing where they use lasers to set up where they're at on a certain cut of meat, and that just starts doing what it needs to do, right? Much like if you go back to the Iowa dairy farmer that I was talking about, he's got a laser that looks at the bag on a cow, and it measures where the teats are, and then it's able to suction cup the teats, and then it starts going to work. It's actually very cool just by use of crosshair laser technology. So that's kind of where I could see it going, is crosshairs on a cut of meat, like a hind quarter, and it starts cutting it up how it needs to go, shoulder, so on and so forth. The thing is, let's assume everything starts going robotic. Do you think companies will be willing to separate the human interaction portion with the initial death of the animal, or will it always maintain like that human interaction? Do you think they might start using robotics in terms of they just do like a guillotine or something, and that's how they'd start the body and the carcass? Or what do you think they would end up doing?
I don't know. That's
Yeah.
wouldn't surprise me that they get these animals to move through a chute, and they do that now,
Right.
and then immobilize them physically, and then hit them with a bolt. But they could do that almost like a squeeze chute with their head, where they come in, and that those robots can be very, very fast,
Right. And
extremely fast.
that's why that's something I'm thinking about, is like the most realistic action to me would not be a bolt, because the chance that it misses the spot, but rather probably like a guillotine or something. They pick up the carcass and they move it,
Well, but they could do landmarks. They can do the top knot of the head
Yeah.
versus where the eyeballs are, versus where the ears, top of the ears to the bottom of the ears connected. And then they do a measurement on, okay, this animal, they put all that data in. It's just our anatomy, and this is where that's going to be placed. It has to be placed within this, and they can make that measurement, and boom, that fast, as that animal's not moving, and they can stabilize it so the head doesn't move. If you've ever watched, and this was 30 years ago when I was in college, we went through the Weyerhaeuser plant out in Washington, and the way they cut logs into the most efficient and I guess least amount of waste to produce boards or rough cut lumber out of those, and then they would finish later, all done by computer at that time. And they used to have a guy up there, and he would mark those things by hand, and those guys were masters. And now they've been replaced. That was 30 years ago. They've been replaced with all laser, and based on the size of it, it just looks at it and does it. So there's no reason to believe that they couldn't do that with all of this. And there's still got to be people doing it. Right. I can't imagine you could do that without them, but it depends on also how you kill. There used to be a plant here. Midland Pack was there, and it was a kosher kill. So it was a beef that was killed by a rabbi who blessed that steer, and then went ahead and killed it.
See, and I forget about things like that, the religious kill. Yeah.
Sure.
That absolutely has to have the human aspect in that circumstance.
And not just any human. It has to be a rabbi. It has to be
the rabbi.
As far as I know. You're right. So there's those kinds of issues too. What you do? I don't see the Jewish faith making a robot a rabbi. I just don't see that happening. I don't see any religion doing that.
No, No, not at all. I think it'd go against core beliefs and values.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, that's one aspect that you don't even think about.
Right.
And that is a social religious aspect, where the rest of it is just about pure cold production.
Right. No, I absolutely. I didn't even think about that, but that's a very good point.
You're welcome.
I promise from the beginning
I'm
we'd
a
go
thinker.
over.
I'm a
Yeah.
thinker.
I
Yeah.
said from the beginning we'd do 3 topics. I think I'm gonna or 4 topics. I think I'm gonna skip the third one though. We had a pretty lengthy discussion on it about potentially artificial intelligence in farming and ranching. Really, again, your point was it's not really artificial intelligence. It's more of computer-based GPS coordinates where it pops out bales. You're able to pick it up with tractors and stuff like that.
Well, you got it. And now John Deere's just come out with something that is over $1 million, I think, for this piece of equipment that does everything, and
Yeah.
it does, you just put it in the field and does it on its own.
That's the
I don't know
point
who's
is,
going to afford that,
yeah, the use of the technology in terms of computers and grid coordinates, like I think that's really what that point of it was. So I'll put a
Yeah.
link up above so people can enjoy that
Yeah.
one. But for the last probably like 20 minutes that we have left, or a little less, we'll talk about the other thing that I had in mind, which is the future of tech in agriculture. We kind of touched on it a little bit when it came to the butchering aspect and everything along that line. But what I want to get over is kind of the future in general. So I had 2 things. One was, yeah, we'll start with that. One was I saw a thing on Twitter today where a guy said, think of all the amounts of food that we produce every year in terms of grains, whatever it is, and then meat. You take that all together, and that's food for the world, right? And he's like, and then there's all, I don't remember what the number was, because, and then there's this that's all wasted in terms of, maybe it's people don't, some people could say, oh, maybe people didn't finish their meals and stuff like that, but let's exclude that. Think about just the waste in terms of, something sat on the shelf just a little too long, so it gets thrown out, and so on and so forth. And that made me think of what's going to happen if we're able to get technology that can preserve that food. Can you imagine what we can do to that, and potentially even minimize, if not, probably not end, but minimize world hunger? And I thought, what kind of a cool technology that would be. And I just kind of want to get your thoughts on, do you think that's even possible? Is that something that we could do, where we end up getting a technology that preserves our food, all of our meat and all of our grains and stuff, so that, if it is sitting on the shelf too long, we just put it in that thing, or it's got something in it that it just keeps it preserved all the time?
Yeah, that's an interesting. My mind is going, for everything from right now. You got some freeze dry technology that'll take things for 20 plus years.
Right.
Currently, but those are usually finished products. Those aren't necessarily, like a grain. A grain is not a finished product. That's
Right.
that's something that can be made into flours or.
But you could take like bread for example,
Yeah.
right? Instead of it getting moldy, you have some way of preserving it so
Mm-hmm.
that, oh, you know what? I'm not going to eat that in time. I'm going to save the next half of that loaf instead of
Right.
throwing it away. That's on, like, things like that.
Yeah. Well, and when way back when I was, in medical microbiology courses, I had an instructor that he was adamant that, hey, we can irradiate all of our food, and it'll, its shelf life is, indefinite, because there's nothing in there to cause it to rot. That you've taken that completely out of the picture. So, the simple pellet of radiated type energy, you completely sterilize everything in there, and it's not going to affect the food, because, and that was his thing, is it's like you're just changing the DNA of the stuff. Your stomach does the same thing. I don't know, does how much of that breakdown takes place where that food is usable? That's what I would ask and would question. Is you can preserve it, and I think arguably there's been some things where they've taken French fries or a burger, from like some of our larger McDonald's, Wendy's, and let them sit out for a year, and they don't go away. I mean, they don't look great, but they don't go away.
Yeah.
So, we can get even worse with some of that stuff, and trying to do it in a more healthy, sustainable way that way. But
Well,
What does that do to your markets?
well, and before you go into that though, I mean, it goes to the point that I've made about plant-based protein, where I absolutely hate it, is the preservation and the stuff that
Yeah,
goes into that. Like,
right,
how good is that on your body though, too? So like,
right.
there's got to be a way to preserve it without doing that chemical balance, in your body. Because in my opinion, I think preservatives are probably one of the reasons why we have such an issue, such a massive issue with cancer in the United
Right.
States. Is, I think
Right.
preservatives and extra stuff that goes into your food is probably a good reason why a lot of people have carcinogens in their system.
No, I don't disagree. And I think that's not anything that's speculatory. I think they have talked about that from a research standpoint, that,
Yeah.
this is a contributor. May not be the main cause. I mean, there's
Right.
always genetics there too, but it certainly contributes to,
Yeah.
or allows that genetics to take over. So yeah,
So you said
I'm
markets.
yeah. If you do that and you have an abundance of food, which would be fantastic, why not? It's going to come to a market cost. What does it cost to do that? Will people do that? Because those that are doing it aren't doing it because it's a nice thing to do. They're doing it because it's profitable,
Yeah.
and somebody got to profit from it. So
Do you think that
that
could be
makes
the
me
end
wonder.
of agriculture in a way too? Because it could stall market
It could
sales,
sure
and then
slow it.
people, yeah, and then
Could
people can't afford to actually produce it. It's worth
could
not producing in a sense.
It's possible, but we send millions of metric tons of grain, for instance, to other places, and you're always going to fight the social impact, or the social, um, I guess, driving forces behind that. So we send food to some African nations, and this has happened for years. Humanitarian type efforts to send raw grains or flour to people who are starving to death, and does it get to them? Not necessarily. One of the last biggest deals was, look what happened with Haiti when they
Yeah.
had that hurricane and earthquakes, whatever, come through there. I mean, they just devastate them. I mean, they just get pounded. Did the people get that humanitarian aid that was sent there? No, they didn't. It was held by corrupt people. And so that's where that social impact comes to really drive how well that technology is going to be given and shared.
Yeah.
People are going to profit off of it from on one end or the other. So it may be very expensive to do it, and may not be viable until that cost comes down. Someone who needs food certainly can't afford food that's had a high cost of production or preservation to it.
Right.
What are they going to pay for it with?
That's a good point.
So that's part of the problem. It's got to be at a point where people can afford to buy it.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I mean, I know it's a pretty simple answer, but I may be wrong. Hey,
no, I was just thinking, it's like, well, there goes Dad again in his infinite wisdom, throwing out things that I wasn't thinking about. The last thing I wanted to talk about was with 4743, because I have been missing my timestamps today. Ways to minimize injury. So that's the last note I had, but like, I saw
you're talking about ways to reduce injury.
Injury, yeah, because
I don't know.
well, hear me out for a second. All right. There was um a thing that I saw. I don't remember when it was. I think it was like Discovery Channel or something when I was in like junior high or high school. So it's been, well, if it's high school, it's been 10 years. So probably 10, 15 years ago, I saw this, and I always thought it was really cool. But somebody had explained how they had a table saw, and it was designed so that if it touched your finger, it would immediately seize up. It wouldn't cut you. And they're like, no way. So what they do, they took a hot dog out of a package,
Right.
they dried it off, and it's very similar to a finger in terms of
Right.
the moisture content and everything, and how it would feel with the meat. And they took it and they pushed it up there until that hot dog hit the end of just the very tip of that saw, and it immediately seized up. Of course, what's that going to cost? It's going to cost thousands of dollars in repair, but you're not going to cut off a limb or cut off an appendage or something. And that's kind of the technology I was thinking of. Do you think there's stuff maybe future for ag in terms of swathers with those big rolling headers, or combines, or something to that effect with tractors, that maybe there might be sensors in the future that they could add to those, that maybe not stop it and destroy the big piece of equipment, but to halt it and stop it so it doesn't like run you over. Or maybe with a swather, it does stop the header and you can just replace the header out. It's because it's better than that than losing a whole arm or something like that, you know?
Well, yeah. I mean, the technology's there, certainly. I don't think
Right.
that's any kind of a secret. I mean, you can do that. And I think we probably watched that thing. We were so enthralled with this table
Oh, it's
saw
so
that would
cool. Yeah.
stop, that we all were sharing this and say, hey, look at this. And it was like,
Yeah.
wow. But look what it did to this table saw. I mean,
Yeah.
it ruined it, right?
Uh-huh.
Or at least the drive gear, the motor and blade, and just did it in slow motion was unbelievable.
Yeah,
But
it's straight
force that
chaos.
it
That
used,
thing was,
oh my God. Yeah, there was, I think you call that warpage in different
yeah.
areas, but um, yeah, you can put those things in, I'm sure. Again, can you afford it?
Yeah.
So when I was back in when I had a gun and a badge and we would shoot, we got transitioned to some new weapons. And these new weapons, Glock was brand new. And there were no external safeties. There were no palm safeties on these, where like a 45, like a 1911, where when you mash squeeze the handle or the grip, it releases a safety. And then you have a side safety and you can run that thing cocked and locked. And they hand you this thing and you're looking at it and you're going, whoa. And this guy loved this man. Bud Comley was his name. And Bud was a firearms instructor and could do armor. I mean, he was very, very good at it. Great guy. Just one of those people is just, you love him. And showing us this new weapon. And he goes, okay, here's the thing, guys. There's 3 rules to this. Keep your finger off the trigger. I'm like, okay. And it says rule 2, keep your effing finger off the trigger. And we kind of look and he goes, rule 3, keep your effing finger off the effing trigger. Yeah. Until you go to pull it. That was the safety. So how much of this is education about, okay, don't do this. Don't do that. Don't, when this is engaged, and you got warnings that are lawyer driven on every piece of equipment, that you're putting a warning label on something. It's like, are you kidding me? Yeah. What kind of a moron would do that? Why do they think they need to put a sticker? Who would do that? Well, people do that.
Why do people eat Tide Pods? Because they thought it was cool.
God, because they're morons. So
that's yeah. I mean, but that to add to your point, like that's exactly it.
So you can only do so much before genetic cleansing takes care of itself anyway. Yeah. Yeah, you can do that, and I think in something that where you've probably got a lot of people around, there's some safety. There's guards on everything, on saws, and we go back to. And I think a high speed, high production, and some of these saws and stuff that they have in the packing and processing plants for cattle, hogs, chickens, whatever that they're doing. And it's fast. I used to watch video of people on an assembly line doing meat boning off of carcasses. And they still do that. Watch that. These people, I wouldn't want to be in a knife fight with them. They know how to handle a knife. I mean, yeah. You get good at that. And so, but are they also wearing chainmail on their hands and up their arms? Yeah, because they're going to cut through that. I knew butchers that did that. That's what they had. They had chainmail gloves, and I think they still do.
It makes sense.
Yeah. So there's only so much you can do for people to not think. And applications like that in combines or in the logging industry, nothing is exactly the same. It's not like an assembly line. So it's very fluid in situational type things. And I think you have to have an awareness of what's going on around you all the time. You're listening constantly to the condition of your equipment. Can I hear something different? Should that sound right? Does that sound right? Is something going on there that I need to pay attention to? Do I need to shut this down? And you're constantly looking around you. When you're on a swather, for instance, the old styles that I was, grew up on, you looked forward, you're watching your header, you're watching your sickle bar, because they were sickle bars in those days. They weren't even in the little rotator type ones that they have a whole bunch of discs of these things on the bottom, which are way cool. It doesn't even have a header on it anymore. That is with a reel. But you're looking forward, you're looking to the sides, you're looking, and you are turning around and you're looking behind you. You're spending 30% of your time looking behind you to watch and make sure that you're cutting right, or that you're not binding up, and you're listening, and you're constantly paying attention to what's going on. That's what it's about. That's an operator. That's somebody who's doing their job without having a crutch of some equipment stop or fail safe that ruins the equipment. Because you do that with that hot dog dead to a table saw, and you do that out in the field with a piece of logging equipment.
Right.
Oh my God, the expense, or a swather or a combine that is already $500,000 for a new combine with an operator in it. You're taking not just production out, you're taking profit, you're taking everything away from what you just were trying to achieve. And that is, stay sustainable. So you can only do so much. Yeah. The technology is there. There's no doubt the technology is there. I mean, but pay attention.
Yeah.
Keep your effing finger off the effing trigger.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Right.
I thought I just thought it might be something cool to, like,
Yeah.
maybe in the future, but I think you're also on point with, at some point you have to let people either make dumb decisions on their own, or,
Or keep them off the equipment.
Yeah. Where's that diminishing return in terms of, cost and mitigating injury too. It's
Maybe
it's
they're
it's a
careful
fine.
enough to bring you water or bring you lunch, or
Yeah.
drive the fuel truck, run parts. Keep them off that stuff unless
Yeah.
they can do it. And there's some people that are they're hard on equipment. It's like, how did you not hear that? How did they get this way?
They choose not to listen. Yeah.
Choose not to do their job. Yeah. They got their ear pods in listening to music.
That's something I would not be doing in a swather. That, want to talk about losing hearing fast. That's one way to do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a technology in agriculture. Some of the new stuff that NASA is bringing out, they're going to try and incorporate. We'll see how well it's useful at the user level. Some stuff we're looking at what we can do in the butchering aspect. Is it going to become more robotic or not? And then, of course, some of the stuff we just talked about with, like, food preservation and injury mitigation. So with that, I will hand it over to Dad.
Well, and all of these things cost a lot to R&D. They cost a lot to put into effect, and they cost a lot to maintain. And so, it's like us with our audience. It doesn't cost us much, because all we give you is a thank you till you're better paid.